Imagine you are looking at a towering, monolithic skyscraper.
Like a massive corporate headquarters.
Right, exactly. It's sleek, it's impenetrable, and its massive shadow just kind of swallows the city streets below.
Yeah, when you look up at a building like that, there's this immediate expectation of permanence.
Right, it feels like an immovable object deeply rooted in the bedrock of the city. And, well, that is exactly how we usually picture a massive, successful corporate syndicate.
Mm-hmm. The logo is everywhere. The supply chains are flawless.
Yeah, and the employees are just legions of identical suits. But, what happens when you step inside that skyscraper and realize the foundation is actively crumbling?
Or what happens when you reach the top floor and find the executive suites completely empty?
Exactly. The CEO vanished into thin air, and the only people keeping the lights on are the peripheral outcasts down in the basement.
Outcasts who don't even realize the company they work for has gone completely irrevocably bankrupt.
Right. So, welcome to our deep dive. Settle in, because today we are taking a meticulous, measured, and hopefully very relaxing look into the shadowy corners of a famous syndicate.
We're looking at the systemic decay of Team Rocket.
We are. But before we step inside the ruins of this corporate monolith, I want to gently ask you to please leave a like and subscribe to this channel, Decoding the Dark.
Your support is, it's the foundation that allows us to keep analyzing these intricate hidden structures.
It really is. So, jumping right in, I think it is incredibly easy to just picture the cartoonish, mustache-twirling villainy of Team Rocket and, leave your analysis right there at the surface.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we all remember the giant mechanical Meowth balloons.
Right, and the dramatic rehearsed motto.
Yeah, and the relentless theft of Pokémon. But if we actually peel back those loud, colorful, theatrical layers, we find something profoundly melancholic.
We really do, and we are going to meticulously unpack a really fascinating stack of sources today to explore that.
Yeah, we are pulling from comprehensive character wikis, deeply researched ludological essays detailing the game mechanics, and some really analytical articles from places like Koopa TV.
And our mission here, just to be clear, is to explore the organizational hierarchy, the underlying psychological trauma, and the architectural decay of Team Rocket.
Right, not just as, the bad guys, but as an institutional failure.
Exactly. We are looking far beyond that simple binary of good versus evil. We want to understand the syndicate as a failing corporate structure.
And we're going to examine everyone, starting from the untouchable top boss,
down to the cold calculus of their research division, going all the way down to the most peripheral, spectacular failures in their ranks.
Yeah, and to truly understand how a corporation of this scale rots from the inside out, I think we have to look at how their daily operations fundamentally shifted over time.
And one of the essays in our stack takes a really fascinating approach to this. It completely ignores the explicit plot points in dialogue.
It's just such a unique angle.
It is. It tracks the decay purely through ludological storytelling.
And that specific analytical framework is just brilliant. I mean, in a medium like video games, the narrative isn't just in the text boxes.
No, it's in the architecture of the gameplay itself.
Exactly. The essay, which is titled Analysis of the Roster Architecture, Tactical Specialization, and Hierarchical Structures of Team Rocket, it argues that the systemic downfall of the organization from Generation I to Generation the 5 is expressed entirely through their Pokémon rosters.
Rosters that the grunts and executives carry into battle. I love this concept.
Yeah, it's really cool. Let's look at the Kanto branch first, the original Team Rocket operating in the Generation I games.
Okay, so when you analyze their rosters there, they are built almost exclusively around grounded, defensive heavyweights.
Right, we are talking about Pokemon like Rhydon, Nidoqueen, Kangaskhan, Muk.
These are massive, physically imposing creatures with incredibly high defense stats and devastating ground-shattering physical attacks.
Things like Earthquake or Horndrill. And think about what those specific Pokemon represent for a criminal organization from a purely logistical standpoint.
Oh, logistics, yeah. Because a Kangaskhan or a Rhydon isn't just strong.
No, it is a walking symbol of institutional wealth.
No.
It implies vast, secure resources.
Right, you don't just stumble upon a Rhydon in the early routes of Kanto.
And you certainly don't feed and house one without serious capital. I mean, these are Pokemon that require massive amounts of time, money, and highly secure, specialized facilities to train and maintain.
Which perfectly mirrors their actual footprint in the world at that time.
The Kanto branch of Team Rocket literally controlled the game corner in Celadon City.
Yeah, they weren't just running a back alley dice game. They were operating a massive, highly lucrative region-wide casino right out in the open.
And they forcefully occupied Silphco, the largest technological and pharmaceutical corporation in the entire region.
And they held the building for days. They had total institutional dominance.
So when a grunt throws out a right-on, that roster reflects a well-funded, secure organization that is comfortable throwing its weight around.
Because they know they have the infrastructure, the legal loopholes, and the intimidation factor to back it up.
Precisely. They're acting like a state-sanctioned military force.
But then we observe the Johto branch in Generation 2nd, and the ludological shift is, well, it's violent.
It really is. Suddenly you aren't facing a wall of impenetrable wealthy armor.
The tech monopoly has lost its market share.
Right. The resources have dried up, and the company has devolved into a chaotic, desperate guerrilla startup.
The Johto branch completely abandons those expensive defensive heavyweights.
Yeah, they shift their entire roster philosophy toward erratic, poison-reliant, and self-destructive dark-type configurations.
Right, you are suddenly facing endless waves of Coughing, Houndour, Zubat, and Raticate.
These are Pokemon that rely heavily on status conditions, evasion, and hit-and-run tactics. They use Smog, Poison Sting, Fate Attack.
It is such a stark contrast. It feels like moving from a strategic, open-field military occupation to, like, asymmetric, desperate insurgent warfare in the alley.
Yeah, they aren't occupying gleaming corporate towers in Saffron City anymore.
No, they are literally hiding in a dingy, damp basement beneath a novelty souvenir shop in Mahogany Town.
Desperately trying to force wild Magikarp to evolve using pirated radio waves.
Exactly. But I do want to push back on the essay's premise here for a moment, just to play devil's advocate.
Okay, sure.
Is this really a stroke of genius, intentional storytelling by the creators? Or is this just a natural, unavoidable byproduct of the game's actual development cycle?
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Because Generation 2 literally introduced the Dark type purely to balance out the wildly overpowered Psychic types from the first game.
Right. The Psychic types were practically invincible in Gen 4.
Exactly. And of course they introduced a whole new region of Johto Pokemon. So isn't it highly probable that the developers just wanted to showcase the new Dark types, like Houndour and Murkrow, and simply handed them to the bad guys because, well, they are the quote-unquote Dark types?
That is a very sharp critique, and you are absolutely right to point out the mechanical necessities of game development.
Doesn't the game design necessitate the roster change more than the narrative?
Well, the introduction of the Dark type was absolutely a balancing mechanic, first and foremost,
Yeah.
yes. However, the brilliance of the ludological analysis is that it synthesizes the real-world development necessity with the in-universe narrative.
Oh, I see.
Even if the initial motivation was purely to showcase a new mechanical type, the resultant feeling for the player is undeniable. The narrative perfectly, almost beautifully, wraps around those gameplay necessities.
Okay, that makes sense. So the reason they have Houndour might be mechanical, but the effect is that the Syndicate literally goes from controlling major metropolitan cities in broad daylight to hiding in the shadows, clinging to survival.
Exactly. The Dark and Poison type compositions become this brilliant reflection of their survival-driven terror.
Wow, yeah. They are no longer a standing army with supply lines. They are cornered animals lashing out.
And when an organization undergoes that kind of catastrophic architectural shift, from a skyscraper to a basement, you have to look at the top.
You really do. You have to look at the leadership void that precipitated the collapse.
Which brings us to the ultimate architect of this entire criminal enterprise,
Giovanni.
the boss.
Yeah. We all know his public persona, the gym leader of Viridian City, the man in the tailored suit.
But his underlying philosophy regarding the natural world is incredibly cold. According to the lore in our sources, he views Pokemon purely as tools.
To him, they are not partners, they are not companions.
No, they are strictly instruments for wealth, power, and the aggressive continuation of his criminal empire. It is a purely transactional, exploitative relationship.
And that philosophy is perfectly mirrored in his specialty. He specializes in ground-type Pokemon. Which makes sense. The ground type itself represents rigid stability, immovable force, and foundational control.
Giovanni views himself as the bedrock of the world. But that rigid, unyielding philosophy is exactly what makes him so structurally brittle.
Like a skyscraper built with zero flexibility will shatter in an earthquake.
Precisely. When Giovanni is ultimately defeated in his own gym by Red, a child whose entire worldview is based on the empathetic partnership between human and Pokemon and Brinapeka.
He simply cannot process the data.
Right. An empire built on pure exploitation was just overpowered by a partnership based on mutual trust.
And his reaction to that ideological shattering is fascinating. I mean, a good CEO might pivot, they might restructure.
But Giovanni doesn't just step down or take a leave of absence.
No, he completely and instantly abandons the organization. He dissolves Team Rocket, hands over the Earth Badge to the player, and simply vanishes into the wind.
He claims he cannot face his followers after such a humiliating defeat.
But, if we look at the Lullaby event in the Heart Gold and Soul Silver games, we see the true devastating extent of his cowardice.
Oh, yes. That event.
I really want to dig into this specific piece of lore because it completely reframes his character.
Yes, the Tojo Falls time travel event. This is absolutely crucial for understanding the depth of Giovanni's psychological failure.
So, through the mechanics of time travel, the player is transported to a hidden, secluded cave 3 years in the past.
And we bear witness to a deeply private, deeply painful moment between Giovanni and his son, Silver.
And we should remember who Silver is. He's the rival character in the Johto game.
He's the kid who is constantly angry, deeply resentful, and who harbors a violent hatred for Team Rocket.
Right, and for the whole game, you don't really know why he hates them so much, especially since he treats his own Pokémon terribly. But in this flashback in the cave, the puzzle pieces click together.
We see Giovanni packing up, preparing to go into a self-imposed exile, immediately following his defeat by Red. And Silver, his own child, is standing there.
And Silver is begging him not to go, and simultaneously challenging him on his cowardice. He is asking how his powerful father could just quit.
And Giovanni essentially turns his back on his son.
He tells Silver that he must be alone, that he must train in isolation to reclaim his glory.
He puts his own bruised ego, his own profound shame from being defeated by a child, above the basic emotional needs of his own flesh and blood.
He abandons his son out of pure vanity. It is a profound selfish failure of leadership. I mean, he isn't just a failed CEO abandoning his shareholders. He is a failed father abandoning his child because looking at his son reminds him of his own weakness.
It is the ultimate abdication of responsibility. And the psychological ripple effects of that specific abandonment echo throughout the entire syndicate for years.
Right, because when the head of an organization vanishes purely out of shame, it leaves a desperate, necrotic void.
And that brings us to Archer, the highest-ranking executive of the resurrected Johto branch.
Archer is a man tragically trying to fill shoes that were never meant for him.
Operating under the delusion that if he just makes enough noise, his absent father figure will return.
Archer's entire operational motivation in the Generation 6 games is incredibly sad when you analyze it through this sociological lens.
Just think about his grand master plan. He orchestrates this massive, highly coordinated hostile takeover of the Goldenrod radio tower.
But it's not to hold the city hostage for a ransom. It's not to steal a prototype weapon or seize a pharmaceutical patent.
No, the entire operation, the hostage-taking, the battles, the risk, is designed simply to hijack the broadcast signal across the region so he can send a message pleading for Giovanni to come back.
It is a desperate distress signal disguised as an act of regional terrorism.
It really is a child acting out to get a parent's attention. And we can meticulously break down Archer's tactical approach to see that survival-driven terror we discussed earlier.
Yeah, let's look at his specific Generation 2 team, particularly in his final, desperate stand at the top of the radio tower.
He relies heavily on Houndour, Coughing, and his ace, Houndoom.
This isn't a team designed to hold ground or project authority.
No, it is a team designed to pressure opponents mentally and physically, wearing them down through sheer, terrifying attrition.
Looking closely at Archer's Houndoom, I noticed something genuinely terrifying about its moveset that goes far beyond just dealing damage. It perfectly encapsulates that psychological pressure.
Oh, definitely.
Houndoom uses Feint Attack. And mechanically, Feint Attack is a dark-type move that never misses.
Right, as a player, you can't use evasion tactics like Double Team or Sand Attack to protect yourself.
It completely bypasses your defenses. It feels like this psychological inevitability, like Archer's telling you there's absolutely nowhere you can hide in the dark.
That is a brilliant read on the mechanics. It removes the player's agency. You cannot dodge, you can only brace for the impact.
Exactly.
And then you layer the rest of the moveset on top of that inevitability. Houndoom also uses Bite, which introduces a very high flinch rate.
And in the game's logic, flinching means your Pokémon is too intimidated or in too much physical agony to execute its own attack that turn.
It is a mechanic of pure psychological and physical domination.
And it gets worse. He also utilizes Smog and Ember.
Both of these attacks have a high probability of inflicting secondary status conditions, poison and burn.
And both of these conditions inflict passive, continuous damage every single turn. So even when Archer isn't actively hitting you with a massive attack, you are bleeding out.
You are constantly draining your own healing resources, burning through your antidotes and burn heals.
Just watching your Pokemon's health bar tick away slowly while you try to manage the inevitable strikes of feint attack and the flinching from bite. It is a deeply stressful, exhausting, and cruel fight.
It is the tactical equivalent of a slow, suffocating panic.
It forces the player into a state of severe resource management and anxiety.
But despite this vicious, highly optimized, desperate strategy, Archer ultimately loses.
The player defeats him, and when he loses, the thematic connection to Giovanni is perfectly tragically realized.
Archer looks around and accepts his structural failure. He realizes the hijacked broadcast didn't work. The radio waves are silent.
The father figure is not coming back to save him.
So what does he do?
He does exactly what he was taught to do by the man he idolized. He disbands the Neo Team Rocket on the spot, and he disappears into exile.
He tragically mimics the exact cowardly actions of the man he was trying to summon. The cycle of abandonment completes itself perfectly.
The middle management fails because they only know how to emulate the toxic leadership of the vanished CEO.
It's a beautifully written, cyclical tragedy hidden inside a game about catching monsters. The skyscraper falls because the architect built it on a fault line of pure ego.
It really is. Now, before we move on from the executive suites and take a long, relaxing but chilling walk down into the research and development labs of Team Rocket to see how this toxicity mutates into science, I want to pause for just a moment.
Sure.
If you are enjoying this seething deep dive, please remember to leave a like and subscribe to this channel, Decoding the Dark. It is your active support that allows us to keep exploring these fascinating, intricate narratives.
So we have seen the collapse of the executive leadership, from Giovanni's ego to Archer's desperation.
Right, but an organization as massive and deeply entrenched as Team Rocket doesn't just rely on executives and street-level grunts.
To maintain their operations, to build those teleporter pads in Self County, to engineer the radio wave mutations at the Lake of Rage, they rely heavily on technology.
On science and on the systematic clinical exploitation of the natural world.
Which brings us to a character from the animated canon who perfectly embodies the cold calculus of Team Rocket's research and development division.
Dr. Namba.
Yes, the source material describes him as entertainingly detestable, which I think is incredibly accurate for his visual design.
But it almost understates the darkness of his actual function in the narrative. I mean, visually, he bears a striking resemblance to Dr. Wily from the Mega Man series.
He has the wild, uncontrollable hair, the pristine lab coat.
The manic, erratic energy of a classic mad scientist. But what makes him so genuinely chilling to analyze is the stark philosophical contrast between his methods and the methods of your average Team Rocket grunt.
That is a vital distinction to make. The average grunt operates on blunt force.
Right, they throw physical nets, they use sheer numbers, they rely on intimidation.
And they engage in straightforward, albeit aggressive, Pokemon battles. It is thuggery, it is blue-collar crime.
But Dr. Namba operates on a completely different, almost sociopathic level of cruelty. His methods are sterile, they are calculating.
He engages in deep psychological manipulation. He doesn't just want to steal a Pokemon and sell it, he wants to break it.
He wants to bend their biological functions and their emotional bonds to his absolute will through the application of technology.
The specific atrocities he commits are genuinely unsettling when you pull them out of the context of a Saturday morning cartoon and really analyze them.
Let's look at the Lugia incident. His objective is to capture a massive, hyper-powerful, legendary Lugia.
But instead of just deploying a small army of grunts to attack it, which would be the standard Team Rocket protocol,
I mean, if we think about the core mechanics of Pokemon, it's about training, right? It's about building a bond so the creature fights for you willingly.
But the Rage Crown bypasses all of that. It is a technological device that physically attaches to a Pokemon's head, interfacing directly with their neural pathways.
Its sole purpose is to artificially stimulate the anger and aggression centers of the brain. It literally tortures the Pokemon,
forcing it to become violently, uncontrollably mad, maximizing its destructive output while completely erasing its consciousness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He artificially induces a state of pure trauma. and he attempts to demonstrate this device on Richie's Pikachu, Sparky.
He locks Richie and the protagonists in a cage, forcing them to watch helplessly as their beloved companion is trapped into this machine.
And neurologically tortured into becoming a mindless weapon. It is horrific.
It is.
And I think what stands out to me here is what Dr. Namba represents for the Syndicate as a whole. If Giovanni represents the failure of the corporate ego, Dr. Namba is the terrifying endpoint of emotional detachment.
Throughout the entire Pokémon franchise, the core, undeniable thesis is that the bond of empathy between a trainer and their Pokémon makes both of them stronger.
Love equals power. Dr. Namba looks at that empathy, he looks at that love, and he just sees an inefficient variable.
He views the emotional connection between living creatures purely as a weakness to be mathematically bypassed through machinery.
And we see this philosophy perfectly reflected in the Pokemon he chooses to use himself. He doesn't use a Houndoom or an Adoking.
He uses an Electabuzz. And if we look at the specific moves it employs under his command, Thunder Punch, Thunderbolt, and crucially, Light Screen.
Light Screen is such a telling move.
It really is. Mechanically, Light Screen literally creates an artificial technological barrier of light to reduce incoming special damage.
It is a manufactured wall. Dr. Namba surrounds himself with raw electrical energy and synthetic barriers, insulating himself from the natural world he's trying so desperately to dissect and control.
If we contrast him with the standard archetype of the Pokemon professor, like Professor Oak, who studies Pokemon in their natural habitats to understand them and live in harmony with them, Dr. Namba is the dark, inverted mirror.
He studies nature purely to subjugate it. He is the ultimate expression of corporate R&D stripped of all ethics.
Exactly.
So we have the absent, ego-driven leader in Giovanni who abandons his post. We have the desperate, mimicking middle management in Archer who fails to recreate past glory.
And we have the sociopathic, emotionally detached science division in Dr. Namba, who views living things as algorithms.
This is a profoundly toxic corporate culture. The water in this building is entirely poisoned.
So what happens to the employees who actually try to succeed in this environment?
Yeah, what happens to the high achievers, the quote-unquote employees of the month who buy into this corporate structure? Let's move down the hierarchy and look at the A-rank agents, Butch and Cassidy.
Butch and Cassidy are a fascinating sociological study because, at first glance, they appear to be exactly what Team Rocket wants.
They are the ideal corporate soldiers.
They are the false elites. They are actively favored by Giovanni, they are highly successful in their early missions, and they operate with a level of cold competence that makes the protagonist's usual antagonists, Jessie and James, look foolish by comparison.
But if we dig deeply into the psychological profile provided by the Koopa TV analysis in our stack, we uncover a deeply rooted, fragile emotional insecurity beneath their elite veneer.
Let's talk about some of their operations first, because they are significantly more insidious and much more corporate than just waiting in the woods with a net to steal a Pikachu.
Oh, yeah. They run long-term systemic white-collar cons. For instance, they set up an incredibly elaborate fake Pokemon breeding center right in the middle of a major city.
They don't steal the Pokemon by force. They convince trainers to willingly hand over their prized companions under the guise of high-end daycare and specialized training.
They use the facade of a legitimate business to steal them en masse. And later, on Mandarin Island, their operation scales up significantly.
They utilize a drowsy connected to a massive industrial-scale satellite dish to broadcast a hypnotic frequency across the entire region.
They brainwash every Pokemon on the island, forcing them to turn against their loving trainers and march mindlessly into Team Rocket's cages.
Their crimes are elaborate, patient, and highly effective. They understand logistics and scale.
But notice their interpersonal demeanor. Despite their elite status, despite Giovanni's explicit favor and funding, they are incredibly, almost pathetically fragile.
The Koopa TV article points out a brilliant, subtle psychological detail from their very first on-screen encounter with Ash and his friends.
Yeah, when they introduce themselves, the very first thing they say is, payback time.
But as the article astutely notes, payback for what? This is literally the first time Ash has ever laid eyes on them. Ash hasn't done a single thing to them.
It's such an incredibly telling moment of dialogue. They are entirely projecting. They approach the world with this massive unearned chip on their shoulder.
They view themselves as constant victims in a world that they believe is inherently stacked against them.
So they feel a psychological need to lash out and preemptively claim payback against a random kid they just met, just to establish dominance.
It is a classic textbook victim complex, heavily disguised as arrogance.
And we see this fragility manifest most clearly and most comedically in Butch's running gag. Throughout the entire series, almost every character they interact with constantly mispronounces his name.
They call him Botch, Biff, Bob, Bill, Hutch.
And every single time it happens, Butch absolutely loses his temper. He erupts.
He breaks his cool, elite persona in this irritable, furious need to violently correct them. It's Butch. The name is Butch.
On the surface, yes, it is a standard comedic anime trope, but sociologically, within the context of a decaying corporate structure, it demonstrates a man who is utterly and completely dependent on external validation.
He desperately needs people to know his name, to respect his specific title, to verbally acknowledge his status in the hierarchy.
His ego is paper-thin because it relies entirely on how others perceive him.
Which makes their ultimate fate in the series so incredibly ironic and a bit tragic in its own mundane, quiet way.
These are the A-rank agents, the elites. The ones who had Giovanni on speed dial, the ones who look down on everyone else from the upper floors of the skyscraper.
And what happens to them in the end? They don't go down in a blaze of glory. They don't take over the company.
No, they burn out. They completely lose their drive. The stress of maintaining their elite status crushes them, and they quietly quit the syndicate.
We find out much later in the series that Cassidy opens a quiet little cafe, and Butch gets a job working at a local bakery.
It is the ultimate anticlimax for the so-called elites, and it perfectly illustrates the psychological trap they fell into.
They built their entire personal identities around their status within Team Rocket.
They sought their worth entirely from Giovanni's approval, from their A-rank classification, from the rigid corporate structure.
But as we established in the very beginning, that structure is actively decaying. It is a hollow foundation built on a vanished CEO and desperate middle managers.
When you rely entirely on external validation from a corrupt, failing corporation, you are eventually left holding nothing.
The corporate ladder they spent their lives aggressively climbing was leaning against the completely wrong wall.
And when they finally realized it, when the exhaustion set in, all they could do was walk away into total obscurity, completely unfulfilled and unmarked by their years of high-stress service.
It's the ultimate corporate burnout story. You give your life to the company, and the company gives you nothing, so you go bake bread just to feel something real.
Which brings us, finally, to the very bottom of the barrel. If the elites burn out from the stress and fade away into bakeries, what happens to the absolute worst employees in the company?
We are talking about the peripheral outcasts.
The agents who fail spectacularly day after day, region after region for decades. Jessie, James, and Meowth.
And this is where I think we have to ask the biggest, most important question of this entire deep dive.
Why? Why do the agents who fail the most, who get literally blasted into the stratosphere on a daily basis, who have their multi-million-dollar robots destroyed, their complex plans foiled, their dignity shattered by 10-year-olds, why do they end up being the most resilient, the most enduring, and oddly enough, the most genuinely loyal members of this entire rotting organization?
To understand their incredible resilience, we have to look past the comedic failures and deeply, empathetically unpack their individual histories.
Because their persistence isn't born from stupidity or delusion, it is born from surviving unimaginable trauma and intense structural rejection long before they ever put on the black Team Rocket uniform.
Let's start with Jessie. We really need to look at this closely because her backstory is genuinely one of the most tragic, grounded narratives in the entire franchise.
It really is. Most people just see the loud, bossy woman with the impossible, gravity-defying magenta hair who yells at her teammates. They don't know where that volume comes from.
Jessie is an orphan.
Yeah.
And she didn't just lose her mother to a random illness or a standard accident.
No, her mother, Miyamoto, was a high-ranking, deeply loyal Team Rocket agent operating under Giovanni's mother, the previous boss.
When Jessie was only 5 years old, Miyamoto was sent on a highly dangerous corporate mission to the freezing, isolated peaks of the Andes Mountains.
Her mission was to track down and record the voice of the mythical Pokémon Mew, and during this mission, an avalanche struck.
Miyamoto vanished into the snow, leaving her 5-year-old daughter completely alone in the world.
Let's just sit with that reality for a moment. Her mother was literally consumed by the icy wilderness while actively on the clock for this massive corporation.
And the Syndicate, this organization with casinos and skyscrapers and endless wealth, did absolutely nothing to take care of her newly orphaned child.
Nothing. Jessie was forced into the foster care system, and she faced a level of poverty that is difficult to even comprehend.
The lore explicitly states there were times when food was so scarce, when the poverty was so absolute, that Jessie's foster mother had to make meals out of snow.
She literally ate snow to survive the winters. The psychological scarring of that level of childhood destitution and systemic neglect is profound.
When you understand that she came from absolute nothingness, from freezing starvation and total, terrifying abandonment, her entire adult personality snaps into focus.
Her obsession with glamour, her desperate, almost manic desire for wealth, and her fierce, terrifying tenacity begin to make perfect sense.
She is loud, she is aggressive, and she takes up as much space as physically possible because the world actively tried to erase her when she was 5 years old.
She refuses to be invisible ever again. And then, well, we look at James.
James comes from the exact opposite end of the socioeconomic spectrum, but he shares that exact same core experience of structural, systemic rejection.
James was born into massive, suffocating generational wealth. He had estates, he had servants.
But his family was deeply controlling, forcing him into rigid, high society expectations and an arranged marriage to a highly abusive, terrifying woman named Jezebel.
So what did James do? He ran away. He willingly chose homelessness, poverty, and uncertainty over wealthy subjugation. He abandoned the golden cage.
And when he tried to integrate into other, more normal societal structures, he failed completely. Both Jessie and James eventually attended the Pokémon Technical Institute, a highly prestigious, rigorous academy.
And they flunked out. They didn't just fail, they got the lowest grades in the entire recorded history of the school.
Later, they tried to join a bicycle gang. And while they found some temporary camaraderie there, it wasn't a sustainable life.
They were rejected by extreme wealth, rejected by rigorous academia, and rejected by normal society.
But despite all of that failure, despite the constant rejection from every institution he ever touched, James retains this incredible, deep well of emotional empathy.
It is the defining trait of his character, especially when it comes to his Pokémon. Unlike Giovanni, who sees them as tools to be exploited, or Dr. Namba, who literally tortures them with neural crowns, James loves his Pokémon with an intensity that is almost comical, but genuinely touching.
Think about his Chimecho, or his Cacnea, or his Marini. He treats them with such intense coddling care.
When he brings them out of their Pokeballs, they don't just stand ready to fight, they rush to embrace him. Cacnea actively hugs him with spikes, Marini literally poisons him with affection, and he just takes it.
He absorbs the pain because he loves them so deeply. He is a highly anxious, fearful person in his day-to-day life.
He cowers, he complains, he worries about the rent and the food budget.
But the sources note a brilliant, defining contradiction in his character. When his Pokémon are in actual physical danger, all of that anxiety vanishes instantly.
He experiences these sudden, incredible bursts of athletic bravery, throwing his own human body into harm's way with genuine courage to protect the creatures he loves.
His deep empathy completely overrides his chronic fear.
So we have Jessie, forged in freezing trauma and starvation, and James, a runaway who leads with his bleeding heart. How do these two incredibly damaged, constantly failing people survive the brutal, decaying, toxic corporate architecture of Team Rocket without burning out like the elites, Butch and Cassidy?
This is where we synthesize the core psychological argument from the Koopa TV analysis. It all comes down to one fundamental life-saving difference.
Yeah.
Internal validation versus external validation.
Right.
Butch and Cassidy desperately needed the corporation to tell them they were special. They needed the rank, the salary, the name recognition.
Jessie and James do not. Despite their tragic pasts, or perhaps entirely because of them, Jessie and James are remarkably deeply comfortable in their own skin.
They really are. They are so unabashedly, unapologetically themselves. They are heavily into alternative gender expressions, constantly cross-dressing, and wearing these incredibly elaborate, highly theatrical disguises.
And they don't do it just to fool Ash and his friends. Half the time, the disguises are completely unnecessary. They do it because they genuinely enjoy the pageantry.
They find intense amusement and joy in the performance of being villains, even if they are fundamentally terrible at the actual villainy part.
Exactly. They don't need Giovanni to tell them they look good. They know they look good.
They don't need a promotion to executive to feel important, because they have found something far more vital: their chosen family.
Their bond with each other, and crucially with Meowth, a Pokemon who actually taught himself to walk on two legs and speak human language out of his own deep trauma and romantic rejection, is absolute.
Because they find their joy, their daily amusement, and their ultimate validation from within themselves and from their unshakable bond with their trio, they can weather endless structural rejection.
A hyper beam from a Dragonite might blast them physically into the sky, but it cannot shatter their internal foundation. They have each other.
And in a cold, calculating, decaying syndicate, having a genuine family is an impenetrable superpower.
It is strangely beautiful. They are the ultimate survivors of this corporate collapse, precisely because they stopped caring about the rules of the game they were supposed to be playing.
They outlasted the system by ignoring it.
As we bring this deep dive to a gentle close, let's just look back at the grand architecture of the syndicate we've explored today.
We have traced a brilliant, tragic narrative arc.
From the cold, heavily funded institutional dominance of the Kanto era, all the way to the desperate, poison-filled survival terror tactics of Johto.
We saw the cowardly, ego-driven abandonment by leaders like Giovanni, the pathetic, doomed mimicry of Archer, and the cruel, empathy-destroying science of Dr. Namba.
We watched the so-called elite agents burn out from their own hollow external insecurities. And at the very bottom of the rubble, in the basement of the skyscraper, we found Jessie and James, surviving it all through the surprising, unyielding, emotional resilience of chosen family.
It's a remarkable journey.
Before we part ways for the final time today, I want to gently remind you to leave a like and subscribe to this channel, Decoding the Dark. Your presence and your curiosity here mean the world to us.
We covered a massive amount of ground today, exploring the darkest, most broken corners of this fictional world. But I think the most fascinating takeaway isn't the corporate cruelty or the architectural decay. It's the nature of survival.
It is looking at the smoking ruins of that towering skyscraper and seeing exactly who actually has the strength to walk out of the rubble together.
I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day or night.
We saw how the elite members of Team Rocket, the ones who were actually competent, the ones who followed orders and succeeded, ultimately quit to live quiet, mundane lives in cafes and bakeries because their souls were crushed.
We saw how the leaders, the ones with all the power and wealth, ended up in shameful, lonely exile, hiding in caves from their own children.
Is it possible that Jessie and James's constant, spectacular, embarrassing failures were actually their greatest psychological protection?
Think about it. If they had been successful, if they had actually captured Pikachu in episode 2, they would have been promoted.
They would have moved up into the cold, detached ranks of Dr. Namba, or the insecure, paranoid existence of Butch and Cassidy. They would have been forced to become truly, functionally evil.
Perhaps being utterly, consistently terrible at their jobs is the only thing that kept them safely at the bottom.
And perhaps being at the bottom, away from the toxic expectations of success, was the only place where their humanity, their deep empathy, and their chosen family could actually remain intact.
They failed their way into staying human.
Thank you for joining us in the dark. We will see you next time.